right, welcome back. Here we are on our Sunday evening here at the chapel. Proverbs study. We've made it to chapter 26. We're nearing the close of this book, and we'll have a whole book of these chapters saved up online here. Chapter 26 is going to talk about three people specifically: the fool, the gossiper, and the lazy person. We've met them all through here, but this whole chapter is chock full of them. First several verses is all about the fool. Now, remember, a fool in the Bible is not somebody who just does foolish things, even though that's part of it. Fool returns to his folly or his foolishness and all. But specifically, a fool in the Bible is somebody that God calls a fool. He tells us we shouldn't call people fools, but God knows the heart. He says some people are specifically fools. And the way he designates a fool is a fool has said in his heart that there is no God. So I guess you could say a biblical fool is a dedicated atheist. He said in his heart that there is no God. All right, let's read about this fool here, starting in chapter 26, verse 1. A snow in summer. You ever see it snow in the summertime? Oh, that'd be kind of out of place, wouldn't it? Or rain in the harvest time, which was kind of out of place in that part of the world. So honor is not seemly for a fool. That's three things out of place. A fool getting honored, he said, that'd be out of place like snow in the summertime. Verse 2, as the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. So if somebody pronounces a curse on you without cause, don't worry about it. Here's some things that control critters and fools. A whip for the horse, that'll control him. A bridle for the ass, that'll control him. And a rod for the fool's back. So the only thing a fool will respond to is discipline. Verse 4 and 5 go together. They've been a lot of kind of messes you up. I think, remember, when these were written, they weren't given chapters and verses. I always thought 4 and 5 should be just one proverb that goes together. Several of these are that way. You got to read them together, because sometimes people make a lot. Says, well, if you read Proverbs 26:4, it's in contradiction to what the very next one says. No, I think they kind of go together, and let's look at them together. Answer not a fool according to his folly. Don't answer him according to his folly, lest you be like him. But the very next part says, answer a fool according to his folly. See, one of them's answer not a fool according to, the other says answer a fool according to his folly, or according to his foolishness. We'll put them together again. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be like unto him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. And here's the way I deal with this. A lot of things are not just always just either or black and white. Some things can be an either or an or, but it requires discernment to see which one it is at the time. Sometimes it's appropriate to answer that fool according to his folly, as the Bible says. But sometimes he's so foolish he ain't going to listen to you, and you know he's hard anyway, and you're not going to convince him nothing, so just leave him alone. That's the one that Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine, lest they turn and rend you again. So there's a time to answer a fool. There's a time not to answer a fool. And it's up to you to figure out when that time is. Sometimes that's called discernment. Chapter 28, verse 6. He that sends a message by the hand of a fool cuts off the feet and drinks damage. If you want your message to go through, you better make sure it goes by somebody who's not a fool that you can depend on, or you're going to just be getting damage. The legs of the lame are not equal. So is a parable in the mouth of fools. You got to have dependable messengers. God needs dependable messengers too, not foolish messengers. And sometimes he gets some in the pulpit that are foolish messengers, and it's just a parable in the mouth of fools, right? As he that binds a stone in a sling, so is he that gives honor to a fool. That's out of place like snow in the summer. If somebody's putting the stone in the sling, that reminds me of old David going into battle against Goliath, right? He goes out and finds him 5 smooth stones. He puts one in the sling, and So somebody's getting ready to get hurt when they're putting a stone in the sling. They're locking and loading, ain't they? And he says, somebody's about to get hurt too if you give honor to a fool. Damage again. Verse 9. As a thorn goes up into the hand of a drunkard, get a picture of that. Old boy's drunk and he's falling everywhere and he falls into the rose bush and he gets a thorn job through his hands. So is a parable in the mouth of fools. He's going to hurt himself and hurt everybody else, ain't he? Here's the answer to them all, I think, verse 10. The great God that formed all things both rewards the fool and rewards the transgressors. In other words, some things you just got to leave up to God, and God's going to take care of it ultimately. Verse 11, still on the fool here. Boy, here's a pretty picture. Have you had lunch yet? As a dog returns to his vomit. You've seen it, ain't you? Old dog throws up and a little bit he's out there licking it back up. As a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool returns to his folly or foolishness. He's a fool, so he'll continue to act foolishness as long as he's a fool, won't he? Now Peter takes this proverb and puts it over in one of his letters in the New Testament, and he says, as the true proverb is fulfilled, the dog returns to its vomit. But if you read it in Peter, he's using it about a special kind of fools, and they're false prophets. He said they're just like they'll show what they really are eventually, just like the dog that always returns to his vomit. They'll go back to being what they really were. Verse 12, seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? He thinks he's smarter than everybody else in the world. He's wise in his own conceit, right? Well, there's more hope of a fool than for him. I guess you could kind of say he's been pretty foolish himself. 13, now we're going to meet the lazy man. We've exhausted 12 verses on the foolish man. Now we're going to exhaust some verses on the lazy man. The slothful man says, remember the sloth, possum on downers, barely moves. The slothful man says, there's a line in the way. A line's in the street. Now, you probably know somebody like that, and I hope they ain't sitting in your seat. But the lazy man has always got an excuse not to get up and go to work. There's a line in the street. It's dangerous out there. He can always find an excuse for not working. Because he's the slothful man. There's a line in the way, a line in the streets. Let's continue with the lazy man. I didn't point out our outline today. We followed every chapter through. You're right. Fear the Lord, get a good education, and don't be lazy. So we'll continue on the lazy man. Verse 14. As the door turns upon his hinges, got one right behind me. As the door turns upon his hinges, that's how the lazy man does in his bed in the morning before he goes to, instead of getting up to go to work. As the door turns on his hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed. Just roll over and go back to sleep, right? 15. Here's kind of a funny one. The slothful hides his hand in his bosom. It grieves him to bring it again to his mouth. He's so lazy, he can't even, it's too much work for him to move his fork up to his mouth. He's so lazy, somebody needs to feed him, you might say. Don't be lazy. That's what the Bible's telling us all through here, that, hey, if you want to be successful, fear the Lord, get a good education, and don't be lazy. And the fool, don't fear the Lord. We'll throw him in there. See, that's his problem. He don't have any fear of God in him. 16. The sluggard, which is another word for the slothful or lazy. The sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than several men that can render a reason. In other words, you know people like that too, don't you? That they think that they're smarter than everybody else, and all these other people getting up and going to work in the morning are just crazy because they figured out how to scam the system and get their government checks and everything else. And I've known people to go to the doctor before, and act crazy so they can get what they call a crazy check. And then they thought they're smarter than everybody else for doing that. See, they're just lowlifes that ain't got no pride about them. And God's going to deal with them ultimately. The sluggard, he's wiser in his own conceit than seven men that can render a reason. 17. Here's a lesson for us all, I guess. He that passes by and meddles with strife belonging not to him is like a one that takes a dog by the ears. I was watching old Leave It to Beaver one morning this week, I think, and Beaver had read the book Ivanhoe, and he decided he was going to be a defender of women. And he was going to school one morning, there's another little old boy and girl there, and that little boy and girl, he saw that boy push that girl down. So Beaver went over and got in a fight, and he got beat up. And when somebody got off the bus driver was going to say, "What's going on here?" And Beaver says, "He's picking on that girl." Well, the girl says, "No, he's just a big bully. Me and my brother was just standing here." So he took a dog bite. So here's the lesson of that time. Sometimes it's right that, we've got to intervene. Sometimes it's the honorable, godly thing to do to intervene, but you're still taking the dog by the ears. But sometimes you just got to look at something and say, well, that's none of my business right there. I'm not going to take that dog by the ears. Once again, it requires discernment, don't it? And I'm not always right, and you won't be either, but we got to try and pray and discern what's the right thing and when's the right time to say something, ain't it? That was verse 17. Here's 18. As a madman, here's a picture for you too. A madman who's casting firebrands, arrows, and death. Somebody just gone crazy and they're throwing firebrands and arrows and death in every direction. They're crazy. He says, just like that, so is the man that deceives his neighbor. He can cause a lot of harm too, and it can come back on him too. And saith, am not I in sport? Look at me. Verse 20. Here's another fella now we're meeting. We've met in this chapter. We went through the fool and the lazy person. Now we meet the gossiper. They're all in the same boat. Verse 20. Where no wood is, the fire goes out. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that, don't you? If you don't put any wood on the fire, it'll eventually go out. Where no wood is, the fire goes out. So where there's no talebearer or gossiper, the strife ceases. If people just quit talking, sometimes the strife will cease, won't it? As cold, but as long as you keep going around telling tales and stuff, you keep it there all tore up, right? As coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. An old angry, contentious man, well, he just keep things tore up. He'll kindle the strife, kindle it like building the fire, right? And the words of a talebearer, the Bible word for gossiper, the words of a gossiper are as wounds, and they go down into the inmost parts of the belly. Now, I want to tell you something. Maybe one of the biggest lies we were ever taught when we were in first or second grade. We all learned the little rhyme. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's the big lie, ain't it? Words can hurt worse than sticks and stones. Emotional damage can hurt worse than physical damage. So that's what the Bible's saying here, that the talebearer can cause wounds, and it's like being gut shot. They go down to the inmost parts of the... You can hurt people. Burning lips and a wicked heart. That's that talebearer now with evil inside. He's like a potsherd covered with silver dross. A piece of old clay pottery covered with silver dross. He's on the inside, he's rotten, even though he's appearing to be something on the outside. That's what Jesus said about the religious leaders in his days. They were like whitewashed tombs. They looked good on the outside, but they were full of dead men's bones and darkness and filth in the inside. There's that old talebearer. He's got a wicked heart and burning lips. He that hateth dissembles with his lips. Mouth can cause a lot of problem. Laying up deceit within him. When he speaks fair, believe him not. He'll be your buddy to your face and stab you in the back when you turn around. Watch out for that guy. For there are 7 abominations in his heart. He's completely abominable in his heart. 7. And abominations is something that means it's disgusting, and it's disgusting to God. 26, whose hatred, his hatred is covered by deceit. See, he's butting up to you your face and stabbing you in the back. His hatred's covered by deception. His wickedness shall be showed before the whole congregation. That's what you can rest in, that God knows, and this will be revealed whether in this world or the next. Whoso digs a pit shall fall therein, and he that rolls a stone, it'll return upon him. And I think that goes along with this talebearer guy. And we've got a parable like that of our own in modern times that say you can be snared with your own lips. You can keep digging that pit till you fall in, or keep rolling that stone, it'll roll back on you. A lying tongue hates those that are afflicted by it. What's that guy with the burning lips and the evil inside? A lying tongue. He's a gossiper, and he'll tell lies. He hates those people that are afflicted by his tongue. And a flattering mouth of his can work ruin. He can cause a lot of trouble. So remember this. We'll just go over tonight's chapter real fast. Fear the Lord. That means don't be a fool. And number 2 is don't be lazy. And number 3, watch that mouth. It'll get you and a lot of people in trouble too. See you next week.